Intellectuals throughout the time are the ones who influence the culture they lived in and to some extent reshape it, according to the principles and ideas they proclaim. Canadian professor and psychologist Jordan Peterson being no objection from that rule. He rose to fame as opposing to the continuous threat of banning free speech, and as an acute observer he saw the disappearance of purpose the new generations have, mainly because of the lack of responsibility. And as simple as that, people came out from the caves of their renouncement and stepped into the light of Jordan's consistent message. This message appealed to many. People were not lured in by ways of money or for compensatory reasons. They started finding what they were actually looking for, meaning, and a figure that portrays and promotes that. He also wrote books which aided his message with even more validation, including the bestseller 12 Rules for Life, which was a worldwide phenomenon. Memes and internet culture integrating his words and behaviors in their ranks. On the other side of the spectrum, every worldwide publication took a shot at his message and tried to dissect his words in order to find some flaws, let's say, and looked up for an explanation on why he attracts a certain group of people. For example, Channel 4 tried to portray him as a divisive, controversial figure. Vice associated his message with the personal quest of pushing toxic masculinity forward. As he was put under this magnifying glass, actually the so-called observers were observed for their actual reasons to go after this man's reputation, and a large backlash took place. The internet revoked the media's message and preferred to take the words out of his mouth as they were, not filtrated through the sieve of ideology, but to listen to his actual message.
Your capacity for speech is divine. It's the thing that generates order from chaos. Don't underestimate the power of truth. There's nothing more powerful. Now, in order to speak what you might regard as the truth, you have to let go of the outcome. You have to think, all right, I'm going to say what I think. I'm going to state what I think as clearly as I can, and I'm going to live with the consequences no matter what they are. That's an element of faith. The idea is that nothing brings a better world into being than the stated truth. Now, you might have to pay a price for that, but that's fine. You're going to pay a price for every bloody thing you do and everything you don't do. You don't get to choose to not pay a price. You get to choose which poison you're going to take. That's it.
As this message unfolds, one of the most prevalent things that his speech and books have in common is the practicality of that message. It's not very abstract and not out of one's reach, as it would be the case of his book's first rule, which states, "Stand up straight with your shoulders back," which has an obvious meaning and a more profound one. There are three main areas his talks cover which have a high percentage of occurrence. Those refer to his stance on communism, the consistency of one's life, and the responsibility of the individual. Each of these three areas represents why most of one country's social and financial troubles exist. That country's name is Romania. If taken one by one, the problem of the ideology of communism and its implementation is not something new. Countries from the former Eastern Bloc can relate to the horrifying result of this system. Millions of people dead, cultural and national identities lost, ban of free speech and civil liberties. A system that failed its own expectations, a thing that was lost in recent years, and one that Jordan keeps on stressing is the amnesia that surrounds the approach toward this idea. The fact that it wasn't a bad idea after all, just that it was implemented incorrectly and one more try won't hurt. But results can be seen so evidently in the outcome of one of the countries that implemented communism and the horrors it led to. Secondly, being consistent and speaking out the truth is not as hard as it may sound. Even though Peterson always uses phrases such as the burden of truth and of existence, it mainly refers to the responsibility one has and the gravity of that responsibility according to one's status or knowledge. It's self-evident that this duty to speak out the truth is valid at any level of authority, but more evident is that once the power and authority grows, so does the responsibility to do the right thing, because more and more things are at stake. In that regards, politics, government, authorities come first in line as the ones who need to apply this principle. But this does count to every individual as well. Speaking out the truth means being in harmony with the things you know are right and need to be articulated, which unfortunately sometimes are deemed as false and forgotten. Lastly, one's responsibility has been a rather discredited fact in the last while, and as a society we try to concentrate more on the rights we have at our disposal. Responsibility is the bridge which connects our moral duty with reality that manifests in front of us. So one of the large issues is the communist heritage that's been in a variety of forms in many of the institutions and in people's behaviors. Some of the memories include bribing, the use of lobbyism and nepotism, and the lack of competence when it comes to choosing a person fit for a job. According to many ranks and studies, the old habits, let's call them, are reflected in the incapacity of the society to produce change for the better and underline the destructive results of a communist past when it comes to building a foundation for trust and holding people accountable. And that's the country's main issue, the lack of trust in each other. People were used to be betrayed, were taught to see in the person next to them an adversary if somehow that person would start thinking any different from them. And those effects are still seen as a barrier against the advancement of democracy and the promotion of liberty and freedom. And that's what this country needs, people who are willing to let the influence of corruptness to dissolve under the pressure of trust and competence. A lesson that is most needed is the fact that we are different and the things we pursued are different, and standing out is not an inherent bad thing but rather a manifest of our differences and our capabilities.
Nature smiles at the union of freedom and equality in our utopias. For freedom and equality are sworn and everlasting enemies, and when one prevails, the other dies. Leave men free, and their natural inequalities will multiply almost geometrically, as in England and America in the 19th century under laissez-faire. To check the growth of inequality, liberty must be sacrificed, as in Russia after 1917. Even when repressed, inequality grows. Only the man who is below the average in economic ability desires equality. Those who are conscious of superior ability desire freedom, and in the end, superior ability has its way.
As a matter of fact, and according to popular opinion, the surveys do conclude that people are totally aware of the corruption that prevails over the country's institutions. They also know who is responsible for that and are able to throw the fault, but none seems to take action. In principle, the truth is just the other person's responsibility. Sadly, people know the truth when asked, but they don't articulate it. Each looks to the one standing next to him and waiting to speak out the truth even though they are completely aware of it. There's a big difference between knowing the truth and speaking it out. That's seen a lot in politics, as the main frame for law and social stability exists, but it is not enforced. Truth is not spoken out, it exists on papers but not in people's actions, because it brings along with it responsibility, and its weight presses on people's moral tranquility. But the saddest thing is the fact that in a corrupt society, numbed by compromise, telling the truth is considered a risk, as it targets people with influence first of all, and people that have authority and whom you depend on. People on the one hand recognize the crude reality of their elected officials and the fact that they don't respect the law like everybody should. But on the other hand, they always try to remain close to them, regardless of their righteous conduct with the law, because of the benefits they have. But as the antidote to chaos is order, so the antidote to lies and deceit is truth. Responsibility, along with some other words like authenticity, is one of the most misused words, which was diluted of its meaning in recent years. Yet it emerged again as many disastrous events took place nationwide, which stressed the need of someone to come forth and rightfully assume responsibility. People here started to look what other countries do and why they work so well, and they try to import those ideas, which is good. But what's most tragic about this is that we only assume responsibility when something tragic happens. As long as something is bad and doesn't bother us, no action is taken. But once things surface, we try to get those responsible. This is a defining trait of this country, the fact that we are a reactionary society rather than a initiating one. But things did start to take a different turn, and politicians were taken to prison, heads of authorities were judged. Society tries to set itself on a better path. Altogether, combining responsibility with competence will lead to well-prepared individuals which will be able to withstand difficulties to either their job or within their community circle. But straight enough character will rely on speaking out the truth in easy or difficult times.